Welcome to this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. On today's program, we're talking mosquitoes, and we're going to focus in on the Mosquito Control Division here with the City of Suffolk and what services they provide to citizens and business owners to help control that mosquito population that we see throughout the city. Stay tuned. Welcome back to On the Scene, joined now by a guy that most of us recognize. We had Charles on here quite a bit. Charles Abadam, he's the Mosquito Control Superintendent here for the City of Suffolk with the Department of Public Works. Charles, thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Well, it's that time of year again. We say that every year. It is that time every year. And we're talking about mosquitoes and sort of what your division does to help us here in the City of Suffolk. But before we get into specifics about what services you and your crew offer, let's talk about where we are right now. It's mid-May. We've kind of had an odd weather cycle so far to start the year, and I know weather is a big determining factor in how your business runs, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But talk about where we've kind of been so far and where things kind of stand at the moment.
Okay, well, you know, we did have a very strange winter, and then coming into spring, it's almost like we had a fake spring, and then it got cold again, and now we're into what would be considered a good spring. And now, you know, the summer's going to hit, and we are doing a lot of surveillance, and we are seeing a lot of container species. Our albopictus is actually coming out in full force at this point in time, so people need to be out in their yards and dumping anything that's holding water, tip and toss, turn things over so it's not collecting. You know, in areas that are more close together, you know, homes that are close together, like the downtown area, there could be more, I don't know, areas where people have potted plants, anything holding water, kids' toys, and then some, you know, you can't clean your yard all the time, but you need to make sure that you are cleaning your yard. So inspecting your home every week, dumping anything that is holding any water is going to be good right now. We are sure that this population of mosquitoes will actually go down, but if people aren't really taking care of their homes, they need to. And now, you know, woodland species are coming up, and as you know, Suffolk is a swamp. So a large portion of us that living around Suffolk are surrounded by swamp, woodlands. There's temporary pools where mosquitoes are going to breed, ditches run throughout Suffolk. So, you know, we're out there doing that work, you know, inspecting, applying pesticides, and now we're starting to ramp up or starting to begin our spraying season. It's early, which is, we usually don't spray this early, and a lot of people are calling and saying they're having issues. So we are trying to accommodate, and our mosquito surveillance is showing that.
Well, you know, you talked about the fact of Suffolk and its connection with the swamp. Great Dismal Swamp, it's huge. It's a massive part of our certainly our southern portion of the city. But the thing is, people think, well, I'm not near the swamp. Why do I have mosquitoes? Well, obviously they fly. But regardless of that, you talk about the tip and toss and things like that. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget about. They think, well, I'm going to put this out there, I'm going to get the mosquito dunks, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. I don't have running water on my or a creek or a lake or something near my property, but maybe you have a bird bath. Maybe you have backed up gutters. Maybe you have just low spots in your yard that collect water depending upon the rain as it comes and goes. But that's the thing I think people tend to overlook, which can go a big way in helping control the population, right?
Yeah, especially those mosquitoes that you normally feel you're probably breeding it, or your neighbor's breeding it. So having, maybe if you talk to your neighbor, or if you see anything around, you know, talking to them and saying, hey, let's do a, you know, let's clean up our yards and see how the population will go down. Now, once you tip and toss that thing, it's not going to be effective immediately. Because really what you're taking care of are the mosquitoes that are about to hatch out from the eggs and then go into their life stage. You know, 3/4 of a mosquito's life cycle is in the water, and that's most important. You can actually take care of a majority of the mosquitoes in the water phase. You know.
Now, just curious, I don't think I've ever asked you this question, so here's a new one. I know you know the answer. If you have water in a, let's say, a bird bath or a tire that's sitting in your yard or a pot or something you're not using, and you tip it, and you have larvae activity or whatever, what happens? Is it That it?
They
When it hits the
basically
ground?
drown.
Yeah, okay,
Not drown.
okay.
I mean, not drown. They dehydrate because
Okay.
all the water's gone.
Okay.
Now, if you dump that water and it pools somewhere,
Right,
and
right.
you see the water still pooling,
Yep.
they can live in that water.
Okay,
You
okay.
know, it really has to be. You got to tip that water, and that water has to dissipate.
Got it.
you know.
Okay. All right.
And tires are actually really difficult to get water out of,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it doesn't have the rim in it and it's in your backyard
Yeah.
and you have leaves that get into
Yep.
it. And they're a main proponent of breeding these albopictus or these tiger mosquitoes
Mm-hmm.
in our area. One thing a lot of people don't know is that they can actually recycle tires at SIPSA for free.
Right.
You can do what I've seen on the website is 4 tires per day per person.
Got it.
And I think a lot of people just don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have a random tire that's around that they're not doing anything with, which most people don't do anything with tires,
Right. I understand.
they could just bring it to SIPSA
Yep.
for free.
Yep. And then we have those 2 tire amnesty days that the city of Suffolk
Absolutely.
generally does throughout the year. And of course, that's through our refuse division and our recycling drive. And Wayne Jones is a great driver of that. We've had
Absolutely.
him on the program to talk about those events, and that's a great opportunity there. And of course, you know, with those events in particular, they're talking about the private people, they don't want businesses showing up with their
Right.
tires to dispose of. But there's ways to make it work if that
Absolutely.
gives you a bigger draw there.
Absolutely.
So when you're in your yard, and it's the typical yard that you got, how you're set up, you got some plants, you got things like that. Other than the water and or the things that collect water, anything else we kind of look for or do? And I mean, again,
There's so many different terms that I've learned
Right.
over the years. Some homes have what's called a swale instead of a ditch. And
Right.
a swale is just kind of like a lull in the ground that goes closer to the street, and that's where water can pool.
Yes.
We have found a lot of mosquitoes in that type of water.
Mm-hmm.
And just, sometimes it's really difficult to get rid of water around here.
Mm-hmm.
We are very swampy in the environment in Suffolk,
Right.
and it's really difficult for water to shunt away from your home. You probably might have woods in the back that's just holding water.
Right.
So it is kind of difficult. But
Sure.
that brings up, if you have that kind of situation, we do give out free mosquito dunks
Mm-hmm.
to citizens. It's a pack of dunks per person or per home per month.
Right.
And each dunk takes care of 100 square feet.
Okay.
And one thing that I'm suggesting to a lot of people now is to maybe anchor that because they float. So you can, tie it to something that's heavier than it, and it can sink in the water, and then it could stay in there. So it doesn't float away if you put it in a ditch.
Correct.
And it just goes where it wants to
Right.
go, so that'll help anchor it to there. And it's actually 30 days of wet. When it's wet, it's activated. So 30 days of activation, and that means it's got to be in water.
So basically, if someone takes they can come in a 2-pack.
Yeah,
I think
they
is what
come
we
in a
distribute.
2-pack.
And you can get those at a lot of city offices, fire departments, mosquito control division, a lot of locations. You could come to City Hall. We have them here.
Yep.
You just got to provide a driver's license or an address,
Identification, address,
sign, and you're good to go, and you're
good
out.
to go. And I think people don't know that how to judge what 100 square feet looks like.
Yeah.
So if you take a ditch, and on average it's a 2-foot wide ditch, and when we talk about 100 square feet, we're talking about surface water. So it's if you have a 2-foot wide ditch with 2-foot wide surface water,
Right.
and it's 50 feet long,
Right.
that's 100 square feet.
Right.
So do the math. If it's a 5-foot ditch, you got 20 feet that you can do. So it really is. It does depend on what kind of ditch you have,
Right.
and ditches in Suffolk run the gambit.
It's true.
Yeah.
Now, if you have the dunk, can you say, for example, you do the math and you determine, well, I really don't have 100 square feet. I've got 50, but yet there's another 50 over there. Can you break it in half and half and half? Is that
You could.
would
They
that
are a
work?
little bit difficult to break,
yeah.
but you can do that. But
Okay.
I would suggest, like I said, it would be a little bit harder to anchor it because
Yeah.
it's not a donut.
That's true. Yeah.
But you can tie it off,
Yeah.
put it to like
Okay.
a washer or a nut, and just
Right.
drop it down. And
Okay. But again, with these dunks that we're talking about, and I know we'll have a graphic up to show what they look like, You don't hang them from a tree.
No, they have to be in the water.
Right, and I'm sure you've seen probably do some creative things with them and you're going, that's not exactly how they function.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, the 2-pack has instructions on the back.
Right.
So you got to read the instructions.
Of course.
And read the label. But yeah, it is true. A lot of people I have heard and people have told me, yeah, I just throw it out in my yard. But you have to actually throw it in the water because of what it's affecting.
Yes.
Are the larvae,
That's
and the
right.
larvae feed off of the bacteria that come off of it.
Right.
So it's very green, you know.
Yeah.
The bacteria is derived from the ground. So
Good to know. And of course, these are killing the larvae, not the existing.
Adults.
Right.
not the flying
Right.
adults.
That's the thing. It's not an
Right.
insecticide or mosquito. You know,
It's not a repellent.
That's right.
It's
that's
not,
right.
It's
That's
not
right.
killing them.
Don't wear it
when
on
they
your
hit.
neck. It's not going to do any
Right.
good.
Yeah.
It might be fashionable, but that's the extent of it there. But yeah. Okay. Now, do you recommend anything? And again, I know the times that we typically hear are early morning and dusk, where the activity is a little more prevalent. Correct.
Sure.
So, what's good advice if people have to be out in their yard? Say they get home from work, that I want to cut my grass now, and it's starting to get a little dark or whatever, and the mosquitoes are out. What's your suggestions or your tips for being as mosquito, I use the word safe, as you can be
Sure.
on your person?
Wearing long, loose, and light clothing. I know it's very difficult in the summer.
Yeah.
But that's going to ensure that you're not going to get bit. Most mosquitoes can't bite through your clothing.
Right.
Some can.
Right.
But it's going to deter any mosquitoes. I mean, you're going to be active. If you're just hanging out and chilling out,
Yeah.
then you're not sweating much.
Correct.
But if you're doing some activities, they're probably going to be attracted to you more because you're exhaling more carbon dioxide, which they're attracted to.
All right.
If you're out hanging out, I have suggested, that people can buy an industrial fan or an oscillating fan and blow mosquitoes away because they're not really strong flyers. They're
Right.
just very persistent. I mean,
Got
you
it.
can shoo a mosquito
Right.
away and they're coming right back at
That's
you.
right, yeah.
And it could be the same mosquito pestering you, but it's only 2 mosquitoes.
Correct.
And
right.
you've
Seems
gotten
like you got
much
more going on than what
Absolutely.
you do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a perception thing.
Right. Now, are they, just out of curiosity, perfumes, colognes, anything like that as an attractant for them?
They do say that. I don't personally have experienced it, but they say perfumes can attract. But, a lot of the times I try to tell people, use what works.
Right.
If you're noticing that
Correct.
perfume is attracting more mosquitoes,
Right.
you might maybe shy away from that
Right.
when you're going to be outside a lot. If you're going to be inside, most people wearing perfume and they're going to go inside to an event. They're not going outside. and just hanging
Typically
out.
not. You're right.
Yeah.
But
So, a lot of people, there's so many products out there for people to use.
Yep.
Make sure you read the label and use it correctly,
Yes.
but use what works for you. I don't suggest a particular thing, but
Correct.
permethrin is the active ingredient that a lot of products do have that,
Okay.
that work against mosquitoes. Picaridin is also another active ingredient,
Okay.
and DEET.
right.
If some products have permethrin, which is something that you would spray on your clothing and let it dry out, and then your clothing will have protection over a certain
Right.
number of washings.
Right.
So that usually does work. I've actually had a lot of calls about ticks lately too.
Okay.
Ticks aren't something that we deal with,
Right.
but if you're going to be hiking out on some of the trails out in Suffolk, you might want to stuff your pants inside your socks and spray that area down.
Right.
And also make sure you cut your grass low,
Right.
so that the ticks aren't going to be in the high grass and then
it.
grasp onto you when you're walking by that high grass.
Okay.
Ticks are kind of difficult, and
Right.
there is a lot of diseases that they can spread. Nothing in right now at this point in time, Suffolk doesn't have any human cases, no human cases of any mosquito-borne diseases either.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Okay. Now I know when we think about mosquito control here in Suffolk, we think about the dunks, we think about people out spraying and things like that. But your office, your staff are really involved in more than just that. It's not just you. There's a lot of things that go on that people do not see. And you talked about surveillance, which I would like to talk a little bit about that, and also some of the lab work that you do. So if you could talk a little bit about that,
That's
what we
all
provide.
kind of intertwined.
Yeah.
I think the backbone of the work that's being done is based off of the surveillance that we do. And our biologists go out, they set traps in certain areas throughout Suffolk. They pick those traps up the next night, and then they'll identify those mosquitoes to species. They'll actually quantify them, so we know how many species of that, how much of that population of that species is in an area, and then certain mosquito species transmit diseases. So it's only certain mosquitoes that can transmit diseases. So the other ones are all just nuisance mosquitoes. Those that can transmit, we do kind of prioritize to make sure that we knock down any disease that could possibly be in them. When we gather those mosquitoes that do transmit diseases, they get pooled into little vials and they get crushed up and then tested for triple E, Eastern equine encephalitis, and West Nile virus. And those are the two prevalent diseases that do show up in the mosquitoes in Suffolk. So when we spray for the adults, we're trying to really break down that the cycle of disease transmission. So you kill off the mosquitoes that can transmit that disease, and then you stop the transmission of that disease. Now, adult spraying, it's not the end all, you know, and I think a lot of people do think that once a spray goes out that it's just, we're not going to have any mosquitoes. We're going to be able to take care of as many mosquitoes as that spray can actually touch, physically touch. So that's why we do spray in the evening, because mosquitoes are most active in the evening. You know, so the testing and whatnot, that gives us all the information that we need to focus on a particular area. You know, and we do a lot of field studies in our biology program. We've published some papers in scientific journals so that we're learning more about what mosquitoes are about, if they've changed, if their cycle changes, if they're occupying different habitats, if they're feeding on certain mammals and whatnot. So we're learning everything that we can and putting it out there for the scientific community as well to learn about and know that these things are happening in Suffolk.
What is, if you have a mosquito, I don't know what you want to call it, I'm going to call it base, it's a crummy word, but I'm going to use that for, what is their flight distance? How far can they go?
It really does depend. It's almost like someone that's a homebody versus someone that's an adventurer. And certain mosquitoes have a small lifespan, and certain mosquitoes have a longer lifespan. So if you have a longer lifespan, you may travel longer distances, but that's not always the case. The mosquitoes that are breeding in your tires and your bird baths on your property, possibly, they have a very short range. But the thing is that there's so many habitats. So if they have a short range, and say it's 100 feet, this mosquito will go. Well, and this is based off of our surveillance too. So our surveillance trap, it basically has a half-mile radius. So we're going to, on average, say that a mosquito can travel about half-mile, less than that. Some mosquitoes can go miles, especially if you're coming from the swamp and it's going out. But it really does depend on if there's a habitat that they can lay eggs in. So if they have, it's almost like the monarch butterfly. They'll lay eggs here, hatch out, and then they'll travel somewhere here, and then lay eggs, and then that generation goes. So they really can extend their range as long as they have an area where they can inhabit, whether that's as an adult or as an adult.
So kind of a point-to-point type thing, with, again, depending upon the conditions that they find. I mean, they know what they're looking for, correct?
They know places that we can't even find. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, I never knew there was mosquito psychology, as you talked about the types. It's interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, each mosquito is a species.
Correct.
We're just Homo sapiens.
You're right.
And a dog is just a breed. But each mosquito has its own different lifestyle.
Interesting.
And different life cycle. Yeah.
All right.
That's why it's so difficult.
So you're one with the mosquito there, right, Charles?
We try to be as one with the mosquitoes as we can, so we can get the mind of them and know what they're doing.
I understand. Well, how do you determine, let's say, let's back up. If somebody has what they consider to be a mosquito infestation or a big population there, what do they, can they call your office, talk with someone? Do you come out and check it out? What is, based on that conversation, then what dictates I know we have our usual spraying pattern, but we're going to change it, or we're going to do something here. How does that factored in?
So yeah, citizens can call me, or they can go onto our website and they can put in a service request. They can email us. I mean, there's several ways they can get in contact with mosquito control.
Yes.
And from that information, I try to get a sense of what's going on their property, or what they're experiencing in their neighborhood.
Yes.
And if it's a large problem, we will do some extra trapping to see if there's it really is a huge problem.
Right.
Or I can send out a technician, and they'll go and inspect and come back with information and tell us, what's going on. Sometimes it's just, oh, you had this bowl over here, this bucket that was full of water and it was breeding, and you just need to make sure you dump that.
Right.
It could be as simple as that.
Right.
And we don't even have to apply any pesticide.
Right.
We could just do a source reduction, and it's the easiest way to do something.
Right.
Now, so when that kind of information comes back, we can determine based off that and surveillance and other factors that are going into that an area needs to be sprayed. High priority areas is if we do find disease in a mosquito, we're going to focus on that area. And then from that we can say, okay, this is the type of mosquito that was transmitting that disease. This is how we're gonna focus it. Sometimes we can actually really focus on killing that mosquito's larvae too.
Right.
So I'll send my technicians out during the day to search for those habitats. They'll go treat that, and then in the evening, adulticide spray will take care of the adults. So that's how we prioritize. High priority areas. But sometimes there is a high nuisance mosquito that can be very aggressive. Depends on what mosquito it is, as well as where that area is at. So if we can target those mosquitoes that is a high nuisance, and we're getting a lot of calls from an area, we're getting a lot of service requests from an area, then we really need to do more surveillance. We really need to figure out what's going on there, and then apply pesticides as necessary, do the inspections as necessary, treat as necessary.
So it sounds like certainly mosquitoes can be a community issue, and it involves the community giving you feedback and input in conjunction with you and your team of experts that can get out there, analyze the situation, and determine, again, like you said, exactly how to treat the issue. It can be, like you said, as simple as tipping a pot over, or it can be a lot more thorough. Exactly, right, depending upon, but that's why y'all do what you do.
Exactly.
And of course, we think, okay, well, what do mosquito professionals do in the non-heat of the season? It's training, it's gearing up, and it doesn't end, does it?
Especially now, since what we've been experiencing as far as weather is that our season is beginning earlier and it's ending later. Whether or not you believe in climate change or not, what I've seen and the trend that I've seen is that we're beginning earlier and ending later. So we're seeing a warmer season, or we're seeing mosquitoes come out earlier and stay later. So really it has changed over the years, and we see so many mosquitoes now. So it used to be a longer off season, but now we just have to it's a shorter off season, and we have to make sure we have the pesticides necessary for the next year. We have all of our equipment is up to speed. We're analyzing the information that we had from the previous year and seeing if there was some type of trends. We're looking at whether or not there was more disease this year than last year, and if there's anything that maybe we can do to fend off the mosquitoes better in a year. So we kind of are analyzing what we did in the last year and preparing for the oncoming season, which is now it's a shorter off season.
Off season, yeah. Well, again, Charles, thank you, the men and women of your division that do the work here for our citizens here in Suffolk, and try to keep us as mosquito-free and knowing what's going on, monitoring situations, certainly alerting us in the event that we have a disease situation where that, and of course you focus your resources there to knock that out as best as you can. And again, we appreciate everything that y'all do throughout the year.
No problem.
Thanks very much for joining us today.
All right.
All right. That will do it for this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We will see you next time.